Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And on today's show, we have Carlos Hernandez with The Bee and Me. But before we get into that, we're going to address a firestorm of a controversy in Fort Bend County. Over the past week, Fort Bend County has been filled with a lot of heated opinions, a lot of heated conversations over the recent election results of the Fort Bend Independent School District Position 3 Board of Trustee race, where incumbent and favorite Rick Garcia lost that position to a person that we can consider to be a leftist Democrat. And as opinions are heated, a lot of people in Fort Bend are asking the question, how did we lose our school board to the Democrat left? And as the official opinion makers of Fort Bend come down with their official opinions, as those men who would like to be considered the wise elders of Fort Bend, as they pontificate on their official opinions in sort of a heated, accusatory manner, the one thing that is not being addressed is the position points, the policies and the position points of Rick Garcia. And if those policies and position points of Rick Garcia are the reason that Rick Garcia did not win that election. The question is Rick Garcia the reason that Rick Garcia lost that race? So we're going to go ahead and consider that idea today. And before we do so, in order to understand that, we have to tell the story of Rick Garcia. And it is an incredible story. And it all started in 2022. And in 22 in Fort Bend County, the county was in a nightmare situation where the elected establishment was raining down on the people with one bad idea after another, one nightmare idea after another. And those included vaccine drives and mask mandates and the forced closure of businesses and medical surveillance campaigns. And all of these totalitarian threats were coming at us from the county establishment. And there was one man that stood up to them, and he was a breath of fresh air. And his name was Rick Garcia. And it was incredible. He stood up to them and he let them know that he would not obey their dictates. And he was everything that the grassroots community was asking for. He was everything that the people that support parental rights was asking for. He was everything that the people that support individual rights was asking for. And what happened? What happened is the grassroots community, that community that supports parental rights, they went to work and they shook every hand in the county. They made every phone call. They door knocked every door. Rick Garcia led a campaign that was impressive. The man that he was going up against was a well-entrenched figure and a heavy favorite. And by the grace of God, Rick and his team defeated that man and became the school board candidate and just became the new trustee. And just to give you an idea of where Rick stood at that time, I will read you a quote of Rick Garcia when he was being interviewed by a group called Freedom Matters Action Group in 2022. And Freedom Matters Action Group is a group that advocates for individual rights, for parental rights, for liberties at the local level in Fort Bend and Harris County. And this is the quote that he gave them in 22. Quote, "As long as I am on the board, we are not going to have a mask mandate policy. We are not going to require people to get COVID vaccines," unquote. That is Rick Garcia, Fort Bend Independent School District 2022 school board candidate. There you go. That's an incredible quote. And with those set of ideas, Rick Garcia, he won a David and Goliath situation, and we turned our school board into a conservative, parental rights leaning school board. It was incredible. But then once elected, his supporters began to become suspicious. They sort of started to ask the question, were they hoodwinked? Was Rick Garcia, upon entry into this new position, was he beginning his transition from right to left? That was the question. And it all starts with his rhetoric, okay? And again, I gave you a quote from his interview in Freedom Matters Action Group in 2022. But now what we're going to do to give you an idea of why parents began to become suspicious, I'm going to read you two quotes. I'm going to read you another quote from his 2022 Freedom Matters Action Group interview, And then I'm going to compare it to a current quote in his current campaign. And in 2022, this is Rick Garcia's quote. The quickest way to get people not to do something is to try and force them to do something, unquote. That is Rick Garcia, Fort Bend Independent School District 2022 school board candidate, being interviewed by Freedom Matters Action Group. And there it is, again, a man for liberty, a man for freedom. That is a quote that rang for people. It made a lot of sense. And that was in 22. Now let's look at his quote in 2025. Okay, the quote is this. In his current campaign, quote, equity and excellence go hand in hand. Rick Garcia, Fort Bend 2025 school board trustee. Equity and excellence go hand in hand. Okay, now to double down on that, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to show you another quote by Houston Style Magazine as they were introducing him in their article where they interviewed him. Quote, he's reaffirming a mission of service, equity, and visionary leadership, unquote. Houston Style Magazine 2025 describing Rick Garcia. Okay, so there you have it. Equity. Equity, a buzzword to the left. Equity, a word that we didn't hear in 2022. Okay, equity, a signal being sent to the greater leftist community that he's got their back. Okay, and what does equity mean? Equity is one of the three pillar points of DEI: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what DEI is it is a foundational initiative of the modern day left. And the whole purpose of DEI is to promote characteristics of children that does not include the quality of the child's character, okay? That's what it is. It's to say that the quality of the character is not the most important thing about a person. That's what DEI is. That's what equity means. And that's why the left promotes it. You see, what they're doing is they're saying that a person's quality of character is not the most important thing. And in doing so, they sort of, see, this is how the left works. They slip their ideas in. They create cracks in the surface and they slip their ideas in. They never give you a straight answer, okay? So, and what does that mean? So, in that idea is a complete denunciation. It's a devaluation of a person's character, and it's a denunciation of the entire role of parents. It's essentially devaluing parents, okay? Because the whole purpose of parenting is to raise good kids. And good kids means a good quality of character. And so what the state does is they say, oh, that's a good idea, but that's not the best idea. DEI is the best idea, and we're going to put a lot of money behind it because it's other things that matter more, okay? And that's how they sort of get their tentacles around the children and pull them away from the parent, okay? These are very sophisticated ideas. And I'm going to ask a question. Do you think that might be a reason why Rick Garcia didn't get the support that he did in 2022 because he's using leftist buzzwords? I think that might have something to do with it, okay? So that's one use of rhetoric, but now we're going to go ahead and look at endorsements. Again, in 2022, he had the support of the groups that supported parental rights. But in 2025, he received the endorsement of the Pillar PAC. The Pillar PAC. And I would like to say that's a left-wing political action committee, but that's for you to decide. Go to their website. It's easy to find. And look up the Pillar PAC. And you tell me if their website is filled with leftist buzzwords. That's a question for you. But when they endorsed Rick Garcia, here's what they said. They said, quote, firm stance on gender fluidity and LGBTQ, unquote, Pillar PAC 2025 endorsement of Rick Garcia. Okay, how do you think that endorsement rings to the people who supported Rick in 2022? The people that got Rick in office in 2022? The people that worked overtime to get him office? I'm fairly certain that does not get them excited. Is that a reason why Rick Garcia did not win the school board race, right? This is the question, okay? And so all the leftist buzzwords are filling the air around Rick Garcia. It's becoming fairly obvious that he's transitioning to the left. I think people will even acknowledge it. People on the right will acknowledge it. But that's just rhetoric. So now let's go ahead and look at policy. Let's look at the policy of Rick Garcia. And this rhetoric around LGBTQ is out there. We got to ask Pillar Pack what that means. But let's look at his votes. Okay, and we're going to return to the consequential vote on VOCA, the Victims of Crime Act. And what that is a program that allows counselors to underhandedly get control of children and begin the gender transition process. That's what it's about, okay? They begin the gender transition process, and to make an example of this, I would refer everyone to Alexandria Butler's story, where this happened, okay? And so in that vote on VOCA, it passed in Fort Bend County, and it is now a policy in Fort Bend County, and Rick Garcia voted for it. The conservatives on the board did not vote for it, but Rick Garcia did, okay? And then Rick Garcia went essentially on a campaign defending his vote and endorsing VOCA, okay? So now we have to ask the question, is his rhetoric not just signifying his transition, but is his voting record, okay? Is this the reason why Rick Garcia did not get the support that he did in 2022, okay? And that's one vote. But now we have to look at another vote. And Rick Garcia voted to raise your taxes, okay? In the Joe Biden economy, he voted to raise your taxes, okay? Now, I think it's safe to say that the people of Fort Bend County deserve a tax reduction. President Trump at the national level is acknowledging tax reductions at multiple levels, right? But Rick voted to raise your taxes. When our economy is deteriorating, when our currency is devaluing, it's becoming like water, when our elderly are on fixed incomes, he voted to raise your taxes. Okay, maybe that has something to do with Rick Garcia not getting elected. Maybe. You know, maybe he should have let us know in 2022 that he was going to raise taxes. I think it might have caused us to pause a little bit in supporting him in 2022. So there we go, okay? And so what we see is we see a transition, a shift from the right to the left. Not from the left to the right. We'd all like to see that. No. We see a shift from the right to the left. And now Rick is being courted by established left-wing politicians, and they're making campaign donations to Rick Garcia. Why would they do that? Well, because he's supporting their positions, because he's transitioning to their party. It's fairly clear to me he is. He continues this transition, and so they're giving him money. Of course they are. While the right wing is working to make Rick Garcia a household name, the left wing is courting him with campaign donations, okay? Why would they do that? I mean, that's a question for you to answer, but to me it seems as though it's because of this transition process. And so the question is, why would we support him, right? We go support him, we make him a household name, and then he's transitioning, okay? It makes no sense. How do we go and oppose him after we put him in place? We put him in place. He continues to make decisions that are halfway or on the left side. And how do we oppose him at that point? We're the ones that put him in there, right? And so these are the questions that we have, you know? And and everyone knows that the school board position is a stepping stone for higher positions. Everyone knows this. You can look at KP George. KP George started out as a school board trustee, and then he became the most leftist county judge that we've ever seen. He was the darling of the Fort Bend County Democrats. And so that's the question. And so that's the reason why I think that most people didn't support Rick Garcia in the 2025 election, because we do all the backbreaking work, we make him a household name, and then he gets recruited away. And that's the question. So maybe we need to start considering whether or not it is the position points of Rick Garcia that caused him to not get elected. And I think it's safe to say that I think everyone needs to consider that idea, okay? And we need to consider it and evaluate it and think about how to do things going forward. And with that being said, this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on this show, we will bring you all the ideas, the content, the information that you need to take back your village, your borough, your city, your neighborhood, your county, our great Texas counties, our state, the great state of Texas. But the obligation is on you. The obligation is on you to get involved at the local level, because change only happens at the local level. And this race is a clear example of that. because everybody has a heated opinion on this race, and it just goes to demonstrate the value of local elections and finding candidates that are worthy of our endorsements, finding candidates that we believe are trustworthy and that are not going to shift on us when better political opportunities arise. And with that being said, we're now going to switch the directions in this show. And today's show, we have Carlos Hernandez of the Bee and Me. Yep. And we're going to talk about, tell us what we're going to talk about, Carlos.
Well, surprisingly, we're going to talk about honeybees.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a good break.
We're the Bee and Me, and what we do is we teach kids, mainly kids, but adults as well. Anybody who needs some information or wants to listen, we teach them about bees, not how to keep them in a box. Is you can find somebody to teach you how to keep bees all day long. We teach them how to live with them in average everyday situations, whether at the pool, the park, the backyard, in the garden, how to reduce their pesticide footprint by using beneficial insects and co-planting with beneficial plants, stuff like that. That you really can't find anybody to do that. Help. We need beekeepers, but we feel as though we need more keepers of bees, and that's what we call the kids when we talk to them about this.
So would you say that you are more about creating a good, healthy environment for bees to become fertile and grow? Is that bee populations become fertile and grow? Okay.
Absolutely. That's where the reducing their pesticide footprint comes in. Using beneficial insects like nematodes in the soil, or using ladybugs instead of pesticides. We tell the kids that if you use a pesticide, it's going to kill the bad bugs, but it's also going to kill the good bugs too, and we don't want to do that.
Well, because it's all a food supply, food chain, and it's the ecosystem. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. So when it comes to bees here in urban areas, we need them because they help keep all the trees, all the plants, all the bushes, all the flowers, all the shrubbery healthy. And all that is the lungs of the earth. So we need that because all that cleans the air. We need fresh air to breathe. So it's important to have them here.
I mean, like, the whole argument against Americans is that they're the ones that are deterring the natural growth of the environment with their way of life. When these companies come in with these pesticides and it's a complete assault on the environment, and you don't hear anything from left-wing advocacy groups to sort of counter that. I mean, like, what do you think?
I see what you're saying there, and you're right. It can't be one or the other. If you're going to, advocate for a clean environment, you just turn the other cheek to pesticides. They're being used in abundance, and right now, the bee industry on the commercial sector is going through the worst bee loss in U.S. history. Back in 2006, 2007, we went through what we called colony collapse disorder, where commercial bee sector was losing up to 50% of their bee colonies. And that might seem like a lot, and it is, but a beekeeper can bounce back from a loss of 50% of their colonies because they can split them. Let's say they have 100 colonies, they lose 50 of them. They can split the 50 they have, and now they're back up to 100. But back then, that was the worst loss that we had ever experienced, and it drew a lot of concern. And really, that right there was a time where a lot of people's attitudes changed about honeybees. Everybody was afraid of them. Oh my gosh, they're going to attack us, they're going to kill us, and we got to kill them. But that's when we started realizing that, hey, these bees are important to our food supply, and we need them around, and they're dying, so we have to figure out what's going on. So we were able to bounce back. Everything's been fine up until...
And you think it was because of the pesticides?
Well, I mean, I'm not afraid to go out on that limb. My main job is I specialize in live removal and relocation of honeybees. So I'm dealing with feral honeybees on a regular basis. And I can see their decline or their increase. And there hasn't been any kind of decline in the feral industry, mainly in the commercial sector, and in, like I said, I don't mind going out on that limb because there's going to be a number of factors: pesticides, parasites, and pathogens. And beekeepers in the commercial sector, they're pretty good at taking care of their bees.
So there is no decline in the feral side, is what you're saying?
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, and the feral side pesticides are not used.
No, there are. They're used in the garden. People use them in the garden all the time. I'm trying to compare the feral side to the commercial sector and what's going on in the commercial sector right
Domestic, what do you call it, domestic side?
Domestic, you could call the rural side. The commercial bee industry tends to run into pesticides and herbicides and fungicides a lot more often than feral bees do. People use that stuff in their gardens and at home, but when you're taking bees all across the country, trucking them from one state to another, from one crop to another, they're in that stuff all the time, and it's eventually going to catch up to them. And me personally, I feel that's what's going on in the commercial sector right now with the loss that we're going through, and it's catastrophic. It's the worst loss in U.S. history at this point.
Okay, but this is you're not talking about the 2006 loss.
No, I'm talking about right now.
So we're undergoing a second wave of that now.
This is the right now. Back in February, so when honeybees come out of the winter, the first crop that they are trucked in from all over the country to pollinate are almonds in California. And when they get there, they're taken off the truck and they're opened up to log in the bees and see if they're good or healthy or not healthy, because the beekeeper gets paid depending on how strong the colony is. A stronger colony, you make more money. Well, as they're opening up these colonies, they're finding anywhere between 60 to 100% death across the board. This is in February. So that's when the red flags and the alarms started going off, like, hey, we've got a problem. The bees have moved out of the almonds now. We haven't gotten a yield from the almond groves yet, so it was yet to be determined how bad it's affected the almonds. We do know that there were a lot of areas in the almond groves that didn't have a lot of bloom. So not a lot of bloom is going to be not a lot of yield. The bees have moved downstream now into other crops. You're looking at melons and fruits and berries and vegetables, things like that. Here in Texas, our concern is going to be on the melon side. We're I believe the fourth largest producer of watermelons in the country, and the bee loss has affected the bee industry here as well. So in the next couple of months, we should know a little bit more about how much the loss this year is affecting our food industry, the food supply. Once we start to harvest,
It means their prices are going to go up.
prices are going to go up, quality will go up, the quantity is going to go down. It's like I said, it's being this loss this year is being labeled catastrophic, historic, and right now we just don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't look good. We know for sure that it's not going to be, hey, everything's all fine and dandy. So we're expecting the worst. Hopefully that's not the case. If this loss continues on for another year, we're going to be looking at really a national security issue with our food supply. We don't just supply food to ourselves. We supply food to a large portion of, people around the world, around the globe. And, if we can't supply food for them and ourselves, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a big problem. So that's where we are right now. And this is one of the reasons why we started our nonprofit, the BME, is to get out and educate the younger generation about these things and about using pesticides in the environment and about the importance of honeybees and how important it is to save them. Being that they are considered the most important animal on Earth, they really do deserve our attention and care. right now. It's just not a good environment for bees at the moment. So we got a little bit of a problem that we have to deal with. And that's what we do. You know, we go into elementary schools, we go into homeschool groups, scout troops, different festivals and events, and we bring bees along, and we talk to the kids about the importance of bees, how to live with them. Like I said, in the pool of the park, and don't be going crazy. They're not going to come and attack you. There's a thing in the bee
My
industry.
daughter flips out when she sees a bee.
And a lot of people do, and a lot of that has to do with the mainstream media and how they've portrayed bees throughout the years. You know, back in the 70s, there was a movie that came out. This is right when the killer bees were coming, and it was called The Swarm. And the killer bees were coming into the United States, and they came into the United States, and they were killing people,
right.
and they had to do something about the swarm, and they attracted the bees into the Astrodome, and then they killed them in the Astrodome, and I know that ever since then, people have had this fear of bees.
Like the media, they always pick a new bad guy, and they take an everyday average person or whoever that just happens to be in their political sites, and they turn them into a monster just with their own script writers.
Unfortunately, the media is very well versed in creating hype and hysteria. They play on that, and it's just not good. It's irresponsible, for sure. It's irresponsible. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to change that fear. We tell people all the time, you don't have to be afraid of them, but you do have to respect them, for sure. And they get it. The kids, they understand a lot more than adults would think. And hopefully we can make an impact on the future generations so that we can change that mentality that, hey, bees aren't bad. They're not going to come attack you. We need them not just for the garden, but we need them for our food. Definitely, without a doubt. We're looking forward to this year. Last year, one of our accomplishments was that we had petitioned the mayor of Houston to proclaim April as Honeybee Awareness Month, and we were successful at it. And we felt that honeybees needed more than a day.
Absolutely, I would totally support that.
Right now, we have a World Bee Day, Honeybee Awareness Day. But being that they're the most important animal on Earth, and if we were to lose them, we would have a big problem, and so we felt that they deserve more than a day's worth of awareness.
Yeah, I remember a story about a Georgia farmer, and in the 1980s, his dad was running the farm, and they brought all these chemicals for him to start putting on his fields, and it turned the greens into like just the most lush forests, and produced things faster, quicker, more abundant. But then over time, it completely rotted out his soil so that he couldn't grow anything. And then the son took over the farm, and he kept fixing that soil, bringing it back to health, replenished it with natural ingredients, and began essentially growing an organic farm, cattle. And it's a boom business now. And I think that demonstrates everything that you're saying, that when we start putting these harmful chemicals into our foods, we are really messing with Mother Nature.
Absolutely we are.
And our own future.
And there's really no need for all that. We have other alternatives. We have other options. Pesticides are a simple way for some people, just get it over with. But when you do that, you're not just getting rid of the bad stuff, you're getting rid of the good stuff too. And that's just frankly irresponsible when you have other options, better options. And that's what we try to teach the kids, is you've got other options. One of the two main things that we talk to them about are beneficial insects like the ladybug, and co-planting with beneficial plants that bring in good insects and move out the bad insects.
I think there should be a ladybug month.
Well, that's probably a good idea too, because really it's a very valuable insect, more valuable
they're both
than
the most
people.
beautiful insects
For sure.
that exist.
For
They're
sure.
just pure art.
They are, and they're Mother Nature's way of maintaining, balance when it comes to good bugs and bad bugs. Because they're gonna, If you got aphids, you don't want to use pesticides. You put the ladybugs in there, and they'll get rid of your aphids in a day.
What's an aphid?
Aphids are one of the bugs that tend to get into gardens that will destroy a garden. It's one of the primary bugs that people have to worry about when you have a garden. They'll go up and just destroy it. But you.
What do they look like?
Little tiny orange reddish bugs. And so people tend to use pesticides for them quite often. With tomatoes, people growing tomatoes, you'll get worms. Now the aphids can't take care of the worms because they're too big. So we suggest that use other alternatives like praying mantis. But the problem with the praying mantis is that it can get you too, and it can also kill bees. It'll eat bees and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's not going to be killing all of the bees that come to the garden.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our previous generations, not my parents, but my grandparents, everyone had a garden in their backyard, and it was not pesticide filled. And they had higher testosterone levels, more energy, stronger bones. Unfortunately, they were also they also were hit with the smoking epidemic and the overeating epidemic. But when you look at the people that stuck to their gardens, they were the most healthy, fit people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gardeners, people that are in the dirt, in the good soil. That soil is good for you. Being out there, it's good for you. It's healthy. You always feel good whenever you smell the rain. Or soil being moved around. It gives you a different feeling. Me anyway, it gives me a different feeling. I like it. I enjoy it. And we got to keep it healthy. Putting all that stuff, like you were saying. I put all that stuff in the soil, and it's not good. And one of the things we also teach the kids, like with co-planting, is if you do have a garden, you can use cover crops instead of fertilizers, which are also not good for the soil. You get water runoff, and now you got contaminated water. So you can use cover crops. You've got a crop growing here, and you got a cover crop, and then you got a crop growing, and then you just swap them out every year so that you don't have you're not depleting the soil nutrients, and you're not adding
a cover crop. And what's it covering? Another plant or the soil?
No. So let's say you've got a rows of whatever crop it is you're growing. In the middle, you have where you would walk or something. You would grow a cover crop right there of let's just say something like clover. For instance, bees love clover. So you could grow that there, and then the next season, whenever you harvest, you move your rows over, and then you move them over. It's kind of like changing out your crops whenever you grow a lot of corn. You don't want to grow corn forever in a field because you're going to deplete the soil. So you have to change out the crops. That's pretty much how that works.
So you said that this epidemic hit us in 2006, 2007. It's hitting us again now with the. Okay, and it's feral bees or it's commercial bees it's being hit?
It's commercials. It's the commercial industry, and like I said, getting back to that I think a lot of it has to do with pesticides in the environment in those big
factories.
Not factories, but in the big fields, like you go in the almond groves and the orange groves and the melons, and you drive out. If you're driving out in the country, I'm sure a number of people have seen, a biplane or something flying and fertilizing all these crops or throwing pesticides out there, and it's really not.
Well, think about this, right? So what they did is, again, our grandparents' generation, they made the gardens themselves, and what they've done, they've taken us and put us in these, highly urbanized areas where there's less gardens. So they've taken the ability of gardening away from us. And then what they do is in the supermarkets, then they sell you essentially a poisoned vegetable or fruit or an unpoisoned one for a surcharge. And that is absolutely a tactic and an assault on our people. And, it's like, it's just so wrong. It is so wrong to go to the grocery store and be confronted with that choice. Oh, goodness, I don't want to, just, spend all this money. So I'm going to buy poisoned fruits and vegetables that are not organic. It's so wrong that we're confronted with that at the supermarket.
It is, and a lot of it has to, in my opinion anyway, has to do with population. We've grown accustomed and lazy to be, we go and get food. It's easy to go to the grocery store and get it. There's a lot more work and responsibility involved in growing your own food, right? In the past, we didn't have a grocery store that we would go to get this stuff. So the population, we've grown. We need more food than we can grow for ourselves. So we have to have these commercial growers, and the commercial growers, they there's a lot of pressure on them too to produce. They've got to make a living and they've got to feed us. And then so I can see how they would try and find a little bit more an easy way out for themselves, but in the long run, it's just not a good thing for everybody. It really isn't, and we're seeing it now with the collapse of honeybees this year. And like I was saying, hopefully it doesn't continue on the next year, and we get a hold of it.
They're not going to let it continue on because their industry depends on it.
Well, that's right, but the problem here is if you got a beekeeper, let's say there's a story of a beekeeper who last year had over 20,000 colonies, and now he's down to 1,000, and he's done. He says he can't take it anymore. He's done. He's out of it. And if we lose people like that,
that's dangerous.
Now this is what happens. To put in perspective how important honeybees are when it comes to pollinating, if you've got an almond tree with no pollinators on it, it'll give you about 200 pounds of almonds. If you've got that same almond tree that's pollinated, you're looking at about 2,000 pounds. So it's a huge difference.
2,000 pounds of almonds?
Yes.
From one tree?
From one tree, you can get 2,000 pounds of almonds if it's pollinated. If it's not pollinated, you're looking at around 200
Over
pounds.
the lifetime of the tree or what?
In a season.
Wow.
Yes, you can get that.
That is incredible.
So this gives to show you how important it is for bees to be out there pollinating our food supply. Now, there are people out there who don't like honeybees. They say they're invasive and they're destroying, causing detrimental issues with the native pollinators. And I don't think that's much of the case either. And this is the reason why. And once again, it's my opinion because I'm out there dealing with these things on a daily basis. Honeybees, in this case, pollinates an almond tree, and you've got an abundance of bloom. Well, that abundance of bloom is not just feeding the honeybees; it's feeding all the
ecosystem,
the pollinators also, the native pollinators as well. So they have more. You take away the bees, there's less out there being pollinated. There's less bloom. That means there's going to be less food for the native pollinators as well. Now, the native pollinators may not need as much. There's not as abundance. You're going to get like a mason bee or a stingless bee here in Texas. They don't come in large colonies like a honeybee. Honeybees are coming in colonies of 10, 20 to 100,000 bees. Big difference. But I feel as though it balances it out because you've got that 20,000 bees out there pollinating and creating more abundant bloom. So there's going to be more. Just like with us with our food, we got the bees out there pollinating our food crops. Now we got more food, enough food to feed everybody.
Is it possible to have a commercial farm that does not rely on chemicals to...
Absolutely. There are some, you're talking about a bee farm or?
Yeah, bee farm.
So there are a number of apiaries that, that's what we call them, an apiary, that are treatment-free. They don't treat. But a number of beekeepers do treat for varroa mite. Varroa mite is really one of the biggest issues that a beekeeper has to deal with. It can devastate your colony, and so you have to maintain the checks with that. And that's they're looking into seeing if that's a potential problem with the collapse that's going on this year. And then once again, getting back in 2006, 2007, we learned a lot about the varroa mite, and we've learned how to manage and maintain the varroa mite. So much so that it really shouldn't be that much of an issue with the problem with collapse this year. So if you take out varroa mite, if you take out climate, which some people are trying to say it's climate change and loss of habitat or food supply for the bee, that's not, once again, in my opinion, not the case, because you've got a commercial beekeeper who is going to take care of his bees when there's no food. We go through certain times of the year that's called dearth, where the bloom stops, the nectar flow stops, and there's no food for the honeybees. So the beekeeper feeds them. So if there was an issue with climate, the bee in the commercial sector wouldn't be affected because they have a steward there managing and maintaining them through that. If that was climate change was an issue, then someone like me would see it with feral bees. There would be a reduction of feral bees as well, right? Because it's not going to differentiate between these bees over here and these bees over here. It's going to affect everything across the board, and that's just not the case. It's mainly the commercial sector that is dealing with this problem right now.
Okay, so I want to move, unless you have some more things to say on that whole subject area, which I find fascinating and very important. I want to move to your day-to-day job. Is there anything you want to finish up just on the threat to the planet right now with this bee threat?
Well, so the best thing to do is try and educate yourself a little bit more on how not to use pesticides. Really, how to act around bees. You know, if you're at the pool or the park and you see bees flying around, those are foragers. They're not trying to hurt anybody. You know, you got to change your perspective on honeybees. You know, they're not our enemy. They're our friend. We need them. That's what the nonprofit is there for. You know, to get out there and change that mentality of the younger generation so they don't grow up thinking the way a lot of adults do now. Oh no, the bee's bad. We got to kill them, and you know they're going to attack us. Get them out of the yard.
Okay, so if a person has a bee nest in their home, you don't go and kill it. You call you and you have it removed.
Yeah. So
tell me about that.
What I do, my main job is I specialize in live removal and relocation of honeybees. When they're somewhere they don't belong, I go get them out alive and I relocate them. That's what I do. About 8 years ago, I fell off a roof while I was doing a removal, broke my back in 3 places, broke this wrist straight across. It was bent like that right here. Ended up in a military trauma center for 3 days. They were surprised I was still alive, much less not paralyzed. And it's been debilitating. It still is to this day. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then I had my son. I just turned 59 this week, and he's 6. And so I got to thinking I need to figure something else out because my job is dangerous. I could go to work one day and not come home to him. You know, I'm sometimes 40 feet up in a tree dealing with tens of thousands of bees that are trying to kill me, and you know, I can't have that. So I tried to figure something else out. I was talking to a friend of mine. He just recently passed away. He was a youth counselor. He was counseling the kids over at Santa Fe High School. He lived across the street from them. Rest all their souls. And I was telling him about it. He said, well, why don't you just start teaching people about bees, about what you learn? And then I got to thinking about it, and so, you know, I took that step, and, you know, maybe he's right. There's not anybody out there teaching these kids how to be what we call keepers of bees, as we call them, where, you know, you're not necessarily a beekeeper, but, you know, you see bees out in your average everyday life situation. Now you know how to manage them, how to deal with them. You know how to deal with them in your garden. You know what to do, what not to do, and so far we're doing pretty good. We're on target with our mission, you know.
Do you have any, like, when you're out there doing these, removing these bees, do you have any stories of getting in a difficult position when you're removing the bees, getting attacked, or getting in a situation where obviously you fell, or, you know, any other situations like that?
Oh yes, yes. I've dealt with Africanized bees a number of times. There was one time a few years ago where all the TV channels were there. The bees they'd killed the neighbor's dog.
The bees killed a dog?
Oh yes, a 100-pound German Shepherd. So and they were Africanized. Now, the only way you can determine if a bee is Africanized is through a DNA sample. But over the years, you know, dealing with them, their mannerisms are not the same. It's different. You know, it really increases your stress level when you're dealing with these bees. It's like dealing with a highly aggressive dog and a not so aggressive dog. You know, you can tell. And so, yeah, I've dealt with some pretty.
What happened that they killed the dog? How did that happen?
A dog barking, and the bees just not like the dog barking, the noise, the vibrations, and then next thing you know, they're attacking the dog, killing the dog. They had birds caged up. They killed the birds. This was in a backyard, and the bees had been there for a while. I could tell because it was a large colony, and they were in the backyard, and one of the media journalists was across the street with a camera on the front yard, and they were coming and attacking them. So that tells you how intense the situation was. Probably one of the more intense situations I've been in before, but I've had some pretty hairy experiences with them.
But you were totally suited up so they couldn't touch you.
Oh yeah, I was for sure.
And they were probably coming after
well,
you.
Well, with my hands I didn't, because I had to give my gloves. I only had one pair of gloves, and I gave my gloves to one of the cameramen. And so while I'm working,
your hands were getting stung.
Oh yeah. I probably got stung half a dozen times within a matter of seconds. It was pretty quick.
And that doesn't bother you?
I'm used to the stings. They don't really hurt a lot. I don't like getting my fingers stung because I work with my hands, and you get a little bit numb for a few minutes. I don't like anything from here up. That kind of thing is no fun. But most of the time when I'm working, and a lot of my peers will tell you, I tend to work with just shorts, t-shirt, and a baseball cap. I've learned how to manage bees well enough to where I can do that. And in this Texas heat, it's nice to not have to suit up.
What'd you do with those African bees? Where'd you put them?
Those bees didn't make it.
Yeah, they had to be put down.
So they were. Now we specialize in live removal and relocation, and we try to get them out alive. Safety first, and we try to get every colony out alive if we can. But if they are beyond a red zone, then it's just not safe to keep them around.
Because they were just too violent.
Too violent, yes.
You couldn't find a country field to put them in?
Even then, if you got a country field and somebody happens on them, or an animal, it's just...
They're just rabid.
It's just not...
And is that the case with these African bees?
That's what yeah, exactly.
So how do the Africans deal with them?
You'll have to ask
that's a question for them, right? But they're not coming here.
No, not at all. We used to try to save them, but it's just too dangerous. If I get a call and I ask certain questions, and they'll, one time somebody calls and says, yeah, the bees killed my cat. That's a big red flag, because cats are quiet. They're not bothering anything.
And that means you have a triggered set of bees.
Exactly. So if you're mowing by them and they come get you, it's understandable. If you just got a cat that's hanging out and they come and they kill the cat, now that's you got to watch out for them. These are dangerous.
Was that an African set of bees?
For sure. And those are the kind that will kill you. They will. And now, the misnomer, we don't like in the bee industry the killer bees, because all honeybees can kill you. It's just a matter of their characteristics, their mannerisms.
Is the African bee a bigger bee?
No, you can't tell the difference. Visually, you can't tell the difference.
Wow, man.
You can look at their wings under a microscope. There's a difference, and you can look at their DNA structure, but that's it.
That certainly would make a great Hollywood script. I can understand why they made that movie. That's money.
Bees are a lot of people's nightmare. And many people, I go in and I do work, and I'll have to open up the inside of their home, the structure from the inside. And their first concern is, oh my gosh, there's going to be bees all in the house, and it's going to be like a horror movie. But it's really not the case. Sometimes I have them sit as close as you are to me to watch, so that I can quell that fear and give them a whole new perspective on honeybees, so they're not, insanely crazy, scared about them, and want to kill them.
Oh man, very interesting. Anything else you want to say to finish up? It's a very, very fascinating.
Well, we are a nonprofit, the Bee and Me. You can go to our website, thebeeandme.org. We're on Facebook, the Bee and Me. We're donation based. We have honey for gifts. If anybody, we're running a fundraising program right now. We need to find 100 people to donate $100 in 100 days. Anybody who does that, we've got a gift of honey. We've got a 1 pound jar of honey, a 3/4 pound jar of honey. We've got a 6-ounce jar of honey, assortment of honey straws. We've got a honey stick and native Texas wildflower seeds that all come along as a gift for your donation. So if anybody wishes to donate and help us out with our mission, you can go to our website and click the donate button. Be sure to leave your address so that we can get your honey to you. And anybody inside the loop, I was going to say the loop, but the belt, we got a free delivery for them.
Very good.
So if you want to help us, that'd be great.
Excellent. Well, very good. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. And this is Carlos Hernandez with the Bee and Me. Thank you for being here. And with that being said, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show.